So our first lesson of period 2 of world history is on the Achaemenid Dynasty of Persia, and sometimes just known as the Persian Empire. First of all, you need to remember your skills from Unit 1 of world history, right? You need to remember periodization and what the differences are between periods 1 and 2 of world history. You need to remember your spice skills, and we really have to get much better about this. And I'm going to start to ask you to categorize the things I tell you. I'm not going to tell you this is a social issue or this is an economic issue. You need to start characterizing that or categorizing that yourself. And what that's probably going to look like is you're going to take notes, and then later on you're going to go back and label them and say, okay, this is an economic thing. Okay, this is a cultural thing. But remember to view civilizations through that lens. Also remember your compare and contrast skills, right? We compared and contrast two ancient civilizations during period 1. We're going to continue with that skill. We're going to look at comparing and contrasting some other things in this unit. We're also going to take a look at continuity and change. And this is a new skill for period 2 of world history. And this is kind of like comparing and contrasting over time, right? If something is the same across an entire time period, it's a continuity. For example, Christianity is a continuity in European history. However, if it changed from one period to another, then it's just a change, right? So continuity and change. So from period 1 to period 2 of European history, there was a big change, right? Rome went from being this pagan religion or this polytheism to being monotheistic, right? They became Christian. So that's a change. Whereas Europe, for pretty much the rest of world history after period 2, Christianity was a continuity. Before we get started here, we need to do some unteaching, right? So we're talking about the Achaemenid Dynasty of Persia, or the Persian Empire. The movie 300 is garbage. Now, I like the movie 300. It's visually spectacular, great energy, great action. Leonidas is such a great hero. But this portrayal of the Persian Empire is absolute garbage. And so, one of our, daily assignments and one of our lessons in this unit is going to be to look at this movie and think why the Persian Empire might be portrayed this way in middle 2000s in America. If you think about what's gone on in this country over the last 14 years, this shouldn't surprise you, but this is absolute garbage. So take everything you know about the Persian Empire from 300 and just bury that in the fantasy box, because that's all that is. All right, so the Achaemenid dynasty begins with Cyrus the Great. And in the early 500s BCE, he united the Persians and the Medes. Now, these are two ethnic groups, two kingdoms right here. They're neighbors and kind of interacted right along southwestern Persia. And this is modern-day Iran, right? Here's Mesopotamia right here, Egypt, right? India starts right here. Here's the Indus River. Right, so you're familiar with this area, but during the ancient period, there wasn't a large-scale civilization here. So, Cyrus the Great unites the Persians and the Medes, and I believe he was a Persian, so it's kind of more just takes these guys over. But he brought them into his government, and made them part of the political process as well. Right, and then Cyrus conquered to the east and north into Parthia and Bactria. And this is modern-day Afghanistan, right? So if you have any friends or family who've been to Afghanistan or who are there currently, right, Cyrus the Great pushed north into those areas. And later on, he conquered the Babylonian Empire. He actually freed the Jews, and this is talked about in the book of Isaiah. And he also conquered the Egyptians. And finally, he defeated Western Greek kingdoms like the Lydians and the Macedonians. In fact, let's go back to the last. So, we can kind of look at, he starts here and takes over this area. And then first he conquers up into, like I said, Bactria, which is Afghanistan. I'm going to put an A for Afghanistan. And then he moves over and takes over Babylon, sends the Jews back home to Israel, conquers over into Egypt, and finally, like I said, and actually that's Western Greece. Interestingly enough, Troy is approximately right here. All right, so we read about the Trojan War and Odysseus in period 1 of world history. That's where the Trojan War. All right, and so Cyrus was known for his tolerance of the people he conquered. Right, he let them keep their religions and their languages. And this is going to be something different from what the Romans do, especially once the Romans adopt Christianity. He did, however, spread Zoroastrianism, which was the religion of the Persians. And it's interesting, it's a religion that shares many characteristics with Christianity. In fact, people have argued that Christianity takes a lot of its ideas and inspiration from Zoroastrianism. And he also built sophisticated roads to unite his lands. So he's the kind of guy that wasn't going to tell people what to do as long as they paid their taxes and obeyed. And like I said, I mean, look at this guy. He's not some strange-looking exotic dude with chains all on his face. I mean, he looks like Leonidas with a long beard, right? His son Darius continued this policy of cultural tolerance. However, he sought to control and he sought unification through laws and taxes. Unification has the root word of unity or together. He's trying to bring everyone in his empire together through laws and taxes. And he continued to improve the roads and the transportation networks and the bureaucracy throughout the empire, right? Because we understand that big, successful empires are able to move money and things to be bought and things to be sold, right, goods. Great empires are able to move goods around because they have outstanding transportation networks. And like I said, he had this very strong bureaucracy that helped keep everything organized. That's always the challenge of a large group, is keeping it organized. Like I said, the Persians were Zoroastrians. And you take a look at some of these, if you're familiar with Christianity or Islam, take a look at, these characteristics of Zoroastrianism and, does this seem familiar to you, right? The Zoroastrians believe that the universe is a battle between good and evil, and that humans are saved by choosing God over the spirit of evil, the spirit they called shaitan, right? Very similar to the word Satan, right? And, they believe that at the end of time there would be a last judgment and a last showdown between God and shaitan, and that the good who, follow God would go to heaven. They called it the house of song, while the evil people would live in eternal pain, right? Now, the Zoroastrian God is much less human than the gods of the Greeks or Egyptians, much less of a character, right? The pictures you see here are of the prophet Zarathustra. They're not of the God. And so kind of like the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims, a much less personal, human type of God as compared to, like I said, the Greeks and the Egyptians. Now, as I mentioned before, the Achaemenids had outstanding trade networks, right? They took over and used the old Egyptian and Mesopotamian routes, right? So these networks all through here. Remember, a lot of these are following river networks, but they also built what they called the Royal Road, and that's this road here. I'm going to color it in really heavy so it doesn't get mixed up with what I just drew for those rivers. And so, all the way through central, from the mountains that separate, the Iranian plateau here from India, all the way down into Mesopotamia, Egypt, basically into the wealthier parts of the world. They also had trade with India along the coast here. This was before humans had really excellent ocean-going vessels, but they had small ships that could hug the coastline and trade around the corner into India. And so, like I said, China is still divided or still somewhat separated by the mountains. These are the mountains of Afghanistan. This is part of why Afghanistan is such a tough place to conduct a war. It's such rough mountainous terrain. But it, again, separates China from this part of the world. And also up here you've got some very fierce nomadic groups. These are the Huns and the Xiongnu. These are the people who would later become the Mongols. So, even being able to get through some of the nicer terrain means you're just smack dab into some very fierce nomads. Right, and so here's the Persian Empire at its greatest extent. right? And you're starting now to recognize some of the important areas, right? Here's Greece. This is modern-day Turkey. Israel's right here. Egypt, Mesopotamia is right through here. And so, yeah, this is all ancient Persia. Now it's Afghanistan, Pakistan. There's P for Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then Iran's right here. Right, so a very deep history. So you might ask yourself, given our relationship with Iran over the last 10 years, why would the movie 300 present the Persians in such a just an unattractive way? Persian art and architecture, very, very beautiful. You can see some of the influences of Mesopotamia. You can see some of the influences of Egypt, some of the influences of even Greece in some ways. These people all had contact with one another. Remember, we study, these ancient civilizations and these classical civilizations, and we think they're different things, but these people are neighbors. And, ethnically, the Persians are more related to Ukrainians than they are to even the Arabs, so we can see a lot of crossover and connection here. In fact, this little bracelet down here almost reminds me of something Celtic from ancient Ireland. Now, like all empires, the Achaemenids declined. You want to remember how close Lydia is to the Greek states of Athens and Sparta. If I'm looking carefully. Athens and Sparta are right here on the peninsula, and here's the edge of the Persian Empire. In our next lesson, we're going to study Alexander the Great. He's a Macedonian from up here, and so he's going to be part of why the Persian Empire. But we also have to remember that, multicultural states can sometimes be very fragile. The Persians ruled many, many different ethnic groups. And once Alexander the Great starts coming through and rampaging through the empire, it's very easy for those ethnic groups and those original kingdoms to start breaking off very quickly. All right, so back to this garbage, right? This is supposedly Xerxes, who was a great-grandson of Darius, or of Cyrus. And here's your kind of stereotypical Iranian terrorist, right? Given our history of what we've gone through with Iran over the last 10 years, and really since the 1980s, why would an American movie present Persia in such a nasty way? Well, figure it out. All right, thanks for watching.